to what matters. I am so pleased to be before you once again. This is a very interesting topic that we're going to cover. My guest here is Maurice Barnett. He has learned experience and he also is a professional in the field dealing with homelessness. Maurice Barnett, how do you see homelessness?
Okay, so the homeless crisis didn't just start, right? This is something that developed over a long period of time, which really wasn't that long, right? So if you go back 30 years, Skid Row wouldn't look like it does now. If we go back further than that, maybe even 40 years, it was very rare to see someone living on the street, right? But
Yeah.
fast forward to today, where we have this situation where the homeless situation and the crisis has come to a point where it's almost normal, right? To see someone living out on the street. And we're talking about someone that's not even in a tent, right? Just on the sidewalk, eating their food and appearing to exist right there in probably a circle of about 5 feet around them,
Yeah.
right? But how do we get there?
Good question.
Well, I see the homeless situation as two parts, right? I see two sides. I see those who choose to be homeless because that's just a lifestyle choice. And then those people who are forced into homelessness because of some circumstance that impacted their life.
Do you think the majority of the people that are on the street, or they either choose to be homeless or they're primarily stuck in being homeless?
It just depends on where you're at, right? So if you look at Skid Row, and the homeless population in Skid Row is primarily those who are finding the homeless lifestyle advantageous, right? They can live without the restrictions, without the responsibility, without a lot of things that they probably don't want to get involved in, working, being responsible for paying bills and things like that. So going down into Skid Row, there's a lifestyle that's supported, because to try to resolve what was going on and how the people in Skid Row were living, we as a society decided to support it, right? Tried to push back on it, but that wasn't good, and some of those things were inhumane, so now we support it.
We felt like it was their right to choose to be on the street.
Right.
So we just left.
Yeah, if someone chooses to not live indoors, we believe that they have the right to do so. But as we moved into trying to help accommodate that lifestyle, there came with a lot of problems, right?
Right.
A lot of abuse that was happening to some people who couldn't defend themselves. They were suffering a lot of trauma. And then those who want to exploit the whole drug addiction, and those people who are, using drugs in the drug culture, they moved into Skid Row, inhabited there just to kind of sell drugs, because that's where a lot of their clients were. And the people who were homeless there, of course, in any society, there's going to be a lot of waste. And so the waste became the biggest issue, is what do we do with all these things that are being accumulated, and then they're discarding this stuff as food. And then some of the stuff is even, worse than that, because there's feces and things like that that's out there. So trying to figure out how to deal with that, we came up with the solution to have waste management come through, clean up the mess, and try to keep it sanitary, right? Bring in showers, offer tents, do a lot of things to support it. And because there's a strong drug culture down there, there also was harm reduction that came out of that, which helped people who were dealing with either drug addiction or drug use do it in a more safe way, I'd say.
So do we allow them to just continue to live out there like that just because they perhaps choose to live that way, or because they find themselves out there due to habits or mental illness? What are some of the other options that we should work around in order to help decrease the homeless population?
Okay, so there's been a lot of different options, right? And so what I was talking about was before was supporting it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it became something that was unmanageable because it grew. It just continued to grow and grow. And so we had to move to a different approach, right? And that approach was, now we have to offer real solutions, meaning giving people the opportunity to come indoors if they choose to do so. And those who are choosing to live outdoors, then you're going to have to support that choice on your own, right? You're going to have to figure out how to do that in a way where you're not disrupting the rest of society. So if that's having a vehicle, or, finding places that you can camp from time to time, but not set up and create a lot of waste. Okay, then you move to the more severe population, which those who are experiencing mental illness. And the mental illness could be a variety of range, right? Some people experiencing psychosis, some people just having stress-related issues, trauma-related issues, but at some point they don't want to live indoors. They're not trying to escape society and not be responsible. It's just that something about what's going on with them in their mental state won't allow them to live indoors, because of the confinement might just be too much for them and they can't stay indoors. And so they find it more, I guess, satisfying or have more relief if they're outdoors and they can see everything that's going on with them. That's one situation. Another thing is that someone who has such a severe mental illness that even if they were indoors, somehow they will wander outdoors and then not know how to get back to wherever they were living if they were living in a house. Not just Alzheimer's, but just a sort of psychosis that prevents them from being able to remember that they even have a place or how to get back to the place, and they just venture on out into society.
Yeah, there's people who have been suffering from different types of diseases that would actually get them out into the wilderness, or so to speak, or homeless. They may have aged to a point where, they don't remember where they're at. So, you have people who've actually left their home and never returned. So, there's other options.
Yeah, so there's all these different
ways.
scenarios, right, that are going on that are causing people to become homeless. One of the things that we deal with are the ones who are the most severely having mental illness at the most severe level, because they can't do anything about it. They really don't have the cognitive ability to manage what's going on in their life. And that's a process. We have to engage them, try to gain their trust, and then slowly but surely coax them to go indoors, maybe in a congregate setting, more likely a shelter where there's a lot of supportive services available for them. There's another side that are people who are younger, more viable. They're able to deal with being homeless because it's more of an in and out choice. They can go stay at a friend's house for a little while, shower, clean up, and all that,
Yeah,
and then go back out.
surfing.
Couch surfing is one of the phrases, and then they're able to kind of exist in that way. But they don't really have their own place to stay. They're just kind of going from place to place, and that's usually from just avoiding responsibility, right? Or maybe not having the ability to take care of themselves because they're maybe don't have the education that gives them a job. Maybe there's not a job that pays enough money that allows them to afford an apartment, especially here in California, right? Because it's very expensive to live in California, even for a single person to have a studio apartment. It's going to be $1,700 to maybe $2,000 a month, depending on where it's at. That's a lot of money for a young person to try to come up with. And trying to do the roommate situation may not work. It might be a host of other issues going on that prevent them from being able to, find a place.
Right.
So those are two different types that are going on. But there's another homeless situation that doesn't really get a lot of attention.
What's
and
that?
that's someone who maybe fell on hard times, whatever it was. It could be mismanagement of their finances. They lost a job. The relationship broke up, and they were the one that had to leave the house. And those types end up maybe living with a family member or a close friend, and it's just for a short period of time. So they'll say, hey,
it could turn out to be a long period of time.
it's supposed to be a short period of time,
Right.
because usually that situation starts out with someone saying, hey, can I come stay with you until I get back on my feet, right? And oh, sure, I understand what you're going through, and they let them come in. But then the person is never, or takes a long time to get back on their feet. So it could be years and years. And this person may not have the opportunity to maybe find some resources that could help improve their income. At this point, they may have, ruined their credit, don't have any savings, owe a lot of bills, stressed out, not in the right frame of mind to go to school or improve their lifestyle in that way. And so they just end up on someone's couch until that person, their life is being impeded on in such a way that it's like, you know what, you can't really stay here.
Yeah, usually end up.
I have my own family here, or whatever's going on.
Yeah.
And then they have to move to the next place.
Right.
The only other choice they may have, help-wise, they go like Department of Social Services, is they're going to tell them, okay, you're going to have to go into a shelter. Now that might be okay for a single person that might be around the age 30, 35 years old or something like that. They go into a shelter and they kind of, struggle it out.
Right. But what if you happen to have kids?
There's a lot of situations where there are households that are living with relatives, and those people have kids with them. Even having one kid that's school-aged, right? You're talking about a kid that's developing in school and is comfortable with going to school from, auntie's house, grandmother's house, a close friend's house. But it's very difficult to believe that that kid's going to be able to do well and perform well in school if they're going to school from a shelter.
Right.
And especially if they've never experienced that lifestyle and that change of now living in a shelter and having to go to school, and they've been going to school from kindergarten to say 3rd or 4th grade.
That could be traumatic for the kid.
That would be absolutely traumatizing for the kid. And that's why a lot of parents choose to still just stay in that difficult situation of being homeless, but not
or staying
really,
in their car.
or staying in their car because it's staying in the car with a child is probably a lot more traumatizing, probably than the shelter. But I'm talking about someone who's staying with a friend or a relative. That almost becomes the solution for the homeless problem, because if they go to look for some resources, it sounds like, well, it would seem like that would be available, that they would look at the situation and help them get some type of subsidized housing. But what you find is that they also tell them that the path to that subsidized housing or Section 8 is through a shelter.
Right.
And so a lot of those parents
and for a number of days as well. It's
not just a number,
turnaround.
Not a number of days, probably going to be 6 months to a year that they'll be in that shelter while their paperwork is going through. And I mean, there are some fast tracks to Section 8, but more likely is that that family's going to be in that shelter for some time.
There needs to be another resource for people who are in the middle in situations such as that.
I think that's been overlooked, and I don't think that we've really, as a society, made any type of an uproar or been appalled at that, because you don't see it.
Right.
Most people usually don't disclose. They're embarrassed. There's a lot of stigma behind that. So they might go to work every day living with someone else, and barely living with someone else, like all their stuff in stored someplace, and they're just got a suitcase on the floor in the corner, and they're taking their kid to school every day, and they're just going to go on as if everything is normal.
That's a population that's probably not really being accounted for, that type of homelessness.
There's not many programs to address that. And I think that we're failing people when we don't provide opportunities and look at that as something that is not as drastic, but it's still homelessness. It's still a person that doesn't have their own place to stay. They're not building their life existence in a meaningful way by having a place to stay.
That's because it's determined that if you happen to be staying on someone's living on someone's couch, that's not really considered as homeless.
Right, and I think they came up with a term called underhoused.
Okay.
Right, so you're not
in that category.
Yeah, you're not unhoused anymore. You're considered underhoused, and so that doesn't, it doesn't really open up the dire need, and so resources aren't just offered. But it seems like that would be the most easiest
way
person
to
resolve. I mean, you can resolve that person's problem easy because
homelessness that way.
They probably just need a subsidy. A subsidy would help, like, give them a Section 8 voucher, and now they're only paying 1/3 of whatever their income is. So if they're only making $3,000 a month, then $1,000 would go to their rent, and they'd have enough money to pay for a car and the rest of their expenses
and electricity. Yeah,
and they probably would thrive from that point.
They certainly would.
But that's not. Sadly enough, there's no big dollars going that way.
Now, if you were to suggest a better way to deal with the homeless epidemic, what would you suggest?
Wow, that's a real tough question, right? Because
it is.
There's so many variables that you really have to deal with, right? But if you want to look at making sure that a person isn't forced into homelessness because they can't afford it, then you would have to look at how do we make living easier? How do we make renting an apartment easier? Meaning the credit check stuff, the expense, right?
So they should be a little more forgiving in a sense.
Yeah, because there's some people that you should be able to give a second chance to, right?
Yeah.
Does it involve going into a shelter? It's
right.
just, hey, fill out an application, you meet a criteria, We're going to give you this shot. Here you go. And
that would be a quick path to
for some
housing for some people.
For some
yeah.
people. But when you talk about people who have chosen to live this homeless lifestyle, it's because they can. You know, it's a choice that they can make. There's going to be resources available for them to be able to exist and not have to live in an apartment or pay rent or anything like that. But we are fastly or quickly coming to a place in time where that's not going to be possible.
Wow. So even they may be stripped from those types of resources that they have?
No, they just won't be allowed to live on the street. They're just going to provide them with apartments. Like if you're living on the street, there's a very big chance
you'll get some housing fast.
Yeah. Just because if you're living out there in a tent, you get approached by outreach. They're going to look at your situation. Now, temporarily, you're going to go into a shelter. That part of the process is not going to stop. You're going to hit that shelter, and you're probably going to be in that shelter while, you know, they're helping you resolve certain issues, whatever the barriers to employment are, whatever other lifestyle issues that are present, drug addiction, so forth, trauma-related issue, mental health. All those things are going to get addressed. And then there's going to be a Section 8 voucher or some type of subsidized housing on the other end of that for anybody who's out there homeless in the street. So those pathways have already been designated.
Okay.
I think the person who is couch surfing or living at a relative's, even in a relative's garage or something like that, that's going to be the hardest person to deal with.
So they can, a couch surfer can continue on living under those conditions for years and not really get the resources that they may need.
There's a good chance that would be the case because, you know, you're in the comfort of someone's home.
Yeah.
And you have all the things available to you. And then in order for you to get your own place, you have to go to a shelter. That's a traumatic change. And so I don't think there's many people who are willing to make that change, especially when there's a lot of stigma behind it. If the person is, you know, doing the couch surfing thing, going to work, paying their car note, that has become their life. Having to change and go into a shelter from that lifestyle to that lifestyle, I think it's just too extreme and traumatizing for a person to be able to accept.
I can't understand why they've got to pass through the shelter in order to get to the permanent housing. There should be another pathway that they can take to quickly get housing and to quickly prove that they need the housing. I mean, there's a way that they can show that without having to go through that initiation process. So that's what it looks like.
Yeah.
In order to get a Section 8 voucher.
To me, you know, and just the way I think, when you look at a person's circumstance and it's obvious that they don't have their own address in their own place, that there should be a resource available that's a little bit more immediate. That if they have a job, they have a source of income, they can afford a certain something, that there should be that something available for them without the whole going into the shelter process.
That's
because
right.
I think that going from someone's couch to your own apartment is something that's probably more feasible and more acceptable than going from someone's couch into a shelter and then permanent housing.
Exactly. I mean, they could, if they go from the couch into the shelter and perhaps into the streets and from there into drug activity, they may never make it to the permanent housing because they have to go through all of those different avenues that may be destructive.
Got 5 minutes. So, yes,
So,
absolutely. I think that it could be a very strong blow on someone's self-esteem.
I think that really needs to be looked at. I think in terms of preventing homelessness in some populations, because if they kind of like provide, opportunities, I think that would cut down, the growing mountain of homeless population.
I think you're right.
Well, we're starting to come to an end. Is there anything that you'd like to share with the audience?
Um,
Something that's on your heart, or you may want to, give them some information.
I think what comes to mind is that if anyone is about to, or in a situation where they might think they're about to become homeless, that the sooner you go ask for help, the sooner you tell someone, the better it's going to be for you, because the longer you take to make the decision to do something about it, the less likely that there's going to be an easy solution.
Yeah, that's true. Anything that you let go for so long, it's hard to turn the thing around if you're in a constant direction toward the wrong direction. It takes a while in order to turn the rig around or turn the ship around. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. So I think taking some type of step right away.
Mm-hmm.
Forget about the stigma, forget about how it might feel or your self-esteem.
Yeah, just
ask for help.
Yeah, just ask for help.
Yeah.
That's right. There's someone that's available to help. Yeah, I agree with that. Well, thank you so much for sharing your wealth of information, your insight. I'm sure it's going to be very helpful for our viewing audience. It certainly did enlighten me. So I have a better understanding.
Okay.
So I appreciate you and the work that you're doing out there. I think they need more people like you that can come back after experiencing what the conditions are and say, this is what's happening out there.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what I feel would be the best option for people who are in those conditions. So we value that kind of data that you would share. So
okay.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you bringing me here so that I could talk about it, share some insight. Some of it's my point of view, some of it's just actually what's going on.
Very good. Perhaps I'll invite you again soon because there's so much that we can talk about that deals with environmental issues or mental health, things that affect the community. So,
well, if you want me to come back and talk about jobs, I got a little insight on what's going on with the employment development issues.
Ooh, okay. Yeah, this sounds great. Yes, you're definitely invited back for that.
Okay. All right.
Thank you so much. Again, my audience out there, this has been wonderful. I hope you will stay tuned and check us out again. And feel free to reach out to us. You can reach out to me at Fly Like an Eagle Outreach Inc. You can also go to our website and check out some of our resources there. You can go to flylikeaneagleoutreach.org, and that will be the best way to patch in and